Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Chad here. Today's an exciting video. Today's going to be really a part 2 to a previous video I did on Fortinet's ZTNA offering. Now if you're not familiar with what ZTNA is, this video is really not going to be an introduction to that. I'd recommend you check out my previous video on ZTNA where I did a brief overview of what ZTNA is and how you can use it. The ZTNA portion that I'm going to be demonstrating is a little different from what I did before. So if you've seen my previous video, what we did was we set up those ZTNA tags and then we created a firewall policy to match on those tags and permit or deny certain users from accessing certain resources. Now a couple of you reached out to me and have offered me some questions, and I'm hoping that this video will be able to answer some of those questions as well as what ZTNA really can do and how powerful it is in terms of its operation. So all that being said, what we're going to show you is how to set up a proxy server on the FortiGate to access resources that are internal to the company externally. So an example that I'm going to be showing you is for administrative purposes. In the demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a ZTNA tag that we're going to apply to an administrative user, which that tag is going to be used to authenticate that user to the server and make sure they have the required access that they need. That way they can administratively access the FortiGate externally from the company without having to use a VPN. Alright, so this is a diagram of how EMS operates in my environment. So this will be a little different probably for you, but I did want to make this quick diagram at least to hopefully get you a mental image of the topology, so to speak, of how this actually functions. So what happens is you have your EMS server, right? This is kind of the brains of the operation in terms of tags are concerned. So what this is, in my case, is the EMS server is hosted by Fortinet. Now this makes it really easy to set up because all I have to do is go inside of EMS and tell it I basically define certain functions or policies, I should say, and if a device meets those policies, it's going to provision a tag to that client, which is really cool. So my client over here is going to check in with this EMS server every 60 seconds, and when there is an update, the telemetry process is going to sync to the client and make sure that it is up to date. Now my FortiGate down here is at the edge of my network. However, this FortiGate could really be anywhere in your network, as well as the EMS server. It doesn't have to be hosted by Fortinet for this to be set up. However, if it is inside our local area network down here, you're going to have to provision the EMS server so that the clients are able to reach that remotely via a VIP or whatever means you set that up inside of the FortiGate. So once this gets its tag, the tag is going to be used to authenticate to the FortiGate to access certain company resources. So this way we don't have to set up a VPN. What we're going to set up in this video is we're going to set up the client over here. Once it matches a certain tag, the FortiGate is going to give them access to administratively control the FortiGate remotely. So this would be really unique if you especially have network administrators that are going to be authenticating to the firewall to make changes for whatever reason. This way they don't have to use a VPN. They just open up their laptop and go to a certain URL and they can access the FortiGate securely, and that's the best part of it. So this is my environment. Hopefully this gives you a little idea of the topology, and let's go ahead and get the setup process going. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go ahead and hit log in, and again this is accessing FortiCloud for me to get access to the EMS server. For you, if it's local, just log into your EMS environment however you normally would. For me, I'm going to come under here and click FortiClient EMS, and once this page loads, I'm just going to click on the system ID that I have here for my instance, and it's going to go ahead and log me in. Now I do want to point out real quickly, when I was setting this up in trial environments, I had a lot of problems, and I actually had to consult the Fortinet support team because I had so many bugs. And so I originally set this up on version 7.0.2, and I set it up on EMS version 6.4.4. and I had absolutely no luck at all getting that to work. So I put in a support ticket. They consulted with me for a little bit, and they couldn't really figure out why it wasn't working, but everything was set up, it seemed to be correctly. So then after a few days of troubleshooting, we upgraded the firewall to 7.0.5. We had our EMS upgraded to 7.0.3, as well as our Fortinet clients updated to the latest version. Once all of that was up to date, it still didn't work. So we were really confused about that, and actually it ended up resolving itself somehow. So we're not really quite sure what ended up happening, but if you go through the whole process of setting this up and it does not work, try making sure you're on the latest versions of firmwares for each individual piece of the puzzle, which would be Fortinet client, Fortinet EMS, and your firewall itself. If all of those are up to date and you're still having problems, it could be a misconfiguration, but you could also be having a bug. So just be aware of that. So in my environment, we're on 7.3 here, and my FortiGate is running 7.05, and my Fortinet client itself, I think, is running 7.03 as well. So just be aware of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over here to zero trust tags, and we're going to do zero trust tagging rules. And you can see here I've already got a few in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new tag. So we're going to hit add, and we're going to say admin user as the name. So this is just a name. So this isn't the tag itself. This is just for us to understand what we're doing here. And if you notice here, it says press enter to select. But if we start typing, it'll say press enter to create tag. So we're going to say admin user, and this is the actual tag itself. So we're going to do admin user and then hit enter, and we're going to make sure that's enabled. Now we could come down here and add comments to make it a little easier to understand what this is doing. So we could say here admin access, right? So now we're going to hit add rule, and this is where we actually set up the tagging rules themselves, the policies. So let's say, for instance, you have your administrative users on a certain VLAN or a certain IP range, prefix, whatever. You could certainly put those in here. You can customize this pretty much however you want to match on those certain users. So we'll go ahead and add that, and we're going to hit save. And what this is going to do is it's going to reach out to the firewall now and make sure that tag's there. So let's head over to status. Let's head into the devices themselves, and now I'm going to look at the particular PC that I'm on. And if you scroll down a little bit, we'll see ZTNA tag and AV trust. Let's go ahead and refresh and click back on this user again, and now you see admin user. So that means that this device matches that policy. However, if we go to another device, we can see that it does not match that policy, therefore it does not get the tag. And again, if we come back to this computer, you'll also notice that there is a difference in the Fortinet client version. This is the version that I am currently running, and it's the version that works for me. So now let's head over to our firewall here, and we're going to go ahead and log into the firewall, and then we're going to go over to policy and objects, and then ZTNA. From here, you'll notice I have a test ZTNA rule already set up, and this was just the troubleshooting that I had to go through to make this work. Now, I'm going to have my external IP address blurred out here, but your external IP address is what you use to authenticate against for remote resources. So this would be in placement of whatever your external IP address is what you'd put there. So if we head over here to ZTNA tags, you'll notice admin user is in here, and if I hover over that, more importantly, if I go to view resolved addresses, you'll notice that the IP address of the machine I'm on is what shows up here. So that means that our Fortinet client is talking to Fortinet EMS, and our Fortinet EMS is talking to our FortiGate. Now, one thing real quickly that I forgot to mention here, if we head over to Security Fabric and head over to Fabric Connectors, you're going to need to make sure that the Fortinet EMS is set up and actually talking to the FortiGate. If that is not functioning, ZTNA is not going to work. So do remember to do that. So let's head back over into the ZNA portion. And let's go ahead and set up a new ZTNA server just so I can show you that from start to finish. So what we're going to do is we're going to name this server FortiGate Proxy. And you can name this whatever you would like, whatever is meaningful to you to remember what this device is. Our external interface, that is important to note. This is going to be your interface that is heading towards either your edge router or whatever case whatever the outside interface for your firewall is. And we're going to set the IP address here. And now the external port, I do want to mention here, this is very important. With the external port, do not choose 443 if your firewall is using 443. I'll show you where to enter that port for your firewall here in a moment. But for the external port, this is going to be the port that the client talks to authenticate itself. So this is going to be something unique. In my case, I'm just going to do all 8s. If you're using 443 to access your firewall, which I am, if you notice here, I'm using HTTPS. You don't want to put 443 here, because then what's going to happen is ZTNA is going to start listening on that port, and you have 443 already in use, and you're going to have some issues. So be sure that it's something unique. For the default certificate, you can generate a new certificate, or you can just use some of the pre-built ones. I'm just going to use a pre-built certificate. And then here's where we actually define what type of ZTNA setup this is. So let's go ahead and head to Google and let's type in Fortinet ZTNA setup. And you can see here basic ZTNA configuration pops up. You're going to want to make sure you're looking at the FortiOS version that you're on. And then from there, we're going to search for ZTNA access. So this is a bunch of examples here, and this is really great depending on what you're trying to do. So be sure to check that out. I'm going to put it in the description below. So now that we're back over here to the ZTNA portion, this is where we define what type of ZTNA proxy are we setting up for the server. So are we doing HTTP, HTTPS, or TCP? Now in my case, what I'm trying to do is allow administrative access to this FortiGate itself. So I'm not going to do anything but HTTPS. For the virtual host, this is where we can specify what host we're going to. We're just going to say any. The match by, so if I wanted to, what I could do is I could say what I want to match by is a virtual host here, and I could put in a certain thing. So I could put in a certain DNS or whatever I would like to there. In my case, I'm going to leave that on any. Now the path is very important here, because this is where we can match on certain things. So we can do a substring of something. So let's do a substring of firewall 1. So it's going to look in the URI and it's going to say, do I see firewall 1? So then we're going to click create new. And this is where we're actually going to point it to whatever the internal resource is. So my internal resource is the firewall, and that is 10.55.0.100. And here we can see that there is a port, and that's 443 because I'm using HTTPS. And now once I've got all this saved, I'm going to click OK. And real quickly just go through and see that. So what now I can do is I can also create new, and I can do firewall 2, firewall 3, and I can go through and make a bunch of different URLs to hit for the internal resource. And I would just follow through and do the same thing. So I could have a bunch of these and have a bunch of internal resources for this server. And then once I've got everything, I click OK. Now we're going to head over to ZTNA rules, and we're going to create new. Now this is what actually allows that. So all we've done now is kind of set up the logic, but this is basically the firewall policy that allows that traffic to come through. So we're going to say admin access, and the incoming interface, of course, is our outside internet interface. And something to note here, what I'm going to do is let's take this away. Let's set this to something different. So we'll just say DMZ. If I come down here and I do a tag and I select that tag and then hit close, if I come back up here to this interface, in some of the previous versions, it would actually block that from letting you choose anything other than the interface that you set up. And in this version, it also does that. Once you come down here to ZTNA server and you select your ZTNA server, you'll notice that that interface goes away, and that's because the logic is looking at the ZTNA server and it sees the external interface is this. Therefore, your policy is not going to be able to use any other interface but the same interface that the ZTNA server is using. So your ZTNA server is your FortiGate, right? So it's just saying, hey, you chose this interface over here, you have to use the same interface in your policy. So we've got our ZTNA tag, what we're looking for. If we find that tag, this is the ZTNA server we're going to use. And the destination here is, what are we doing with this? So this is very similar to a firewall policy. We could set this to a certain server. We could set this to whatever you would like internally to restrict access and be as specific as possible. However, I'm going to choose all. If you want to set it up on a certain schedule, you can choose that. We're going to say always, accept, deny, whatever you're looking for. And then here for security profiles, you can specify if you want to do anything special with traffic filtering wise. So once we've got all that set up, we're going to make sure it says enable, and we're going to hit OK. So we're pretty much done with the configuration portion. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this PC here, and we're going to head over here, and let's see. Okay, great. So I've already got that IP address here. Again, that's going to be blurred out for you guys, but I'm going to do HTTPS, which is what we told it to be, and we're going to do port 8888, and we're going to do /firewall 1, and we're going to hit enter. And what you see here is it's asking for us to present a certificate to authenticate ourselves. We're going to make sure this is a certificate that we have on our machine. We're going to click OK. And once it uses that certificate, it's going to go through the TCP three-way handshake to make sure that everything is good there. And then it should theoretically load the firewall here. Server again. And let's edit this. And let's go ahead and take this to just allow anything. And let's go ahead and click OK. OK. And now let's go back and refresh this. And it's working now. So I'm not sure why it doesn't like that /firewall there. Maybe that's a misconfiguration on my part. But anyways, we can see the server now, or the FortiGate now, sorry. So let's go ahead and go back into the ZTNA side of it, of the EMS, and we're going to head over here to tagging rules. And what we're going to do is we're going to break this. So let's go up to admin user and hit edit. And we're going to come down here and delete this rule and hit save. We must have at least one rule. No problem. We'll give it something. We'll do, let's do not installed and up to date. Save that. Save. Not a very secure policy there. Looking for devices that doesn't have antivirus, but this device does have antivirus. So shortly, it should realize that this does not qualify for that tag, and it should take the tag away. So let's refresh. So after refreshing for a little bit, the tag finally took itself off. So let's go ahead and head over to the FortiGate. Let's go over to ZTNA tags, and let's find that tag, and let's do view resolved addresses, and we can see that that address is no longer in there. So that's promising. Let's go ahead and minimize, and we see we have access to it. So let's refresh. And now that's perfect. We can see that the page has been restricted and has been blocked by a ZTNA firewall policy restriction. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully this video was helpful in showing you how to set up ZTNA and how easy it can actually be to set it up. Be sure to check the description below. I'm going to throw in some links for ZTNA setups as well as my previous video to hopefully help you guys get nudged in the right direction. As always, if you need anything, please reach out to me in the comments below, or whatever social media platform that you may find me on. I'll be happy to help. Also, lastly, I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching this video and supporting me and my channel.